A little bit about my background and why I'm here and why I wrote these books and what have you. I think it goes back to the ancestors of people like folks from the Yukon, whether they crossed the land bridge 10,000 years ago, or came up, your ancestors came up on the Klondike, or you came more recently. You kind of had a spirit of adventure to come here. And I think my particular apple has fallen right at the root of the tree. Because my great-grandfather, the day after his marriage to my great-grandmother Emma, got on a sailing ship and went to Australia. What she thought of a honeymoon on a 6-month boat trip with her. No other men on the boat, no head, I don't know. But anyway, that's too long ago, there's no record. My granddad was a witness to the shortest war in history, just off Zanzibar, off the East African coast, and took some photographs, of which there are very few, and I've actually written a story about that in one of my blogs. My dad was in the Highland Light Infantry, Scottish Regiment, before the war, didn't fancy staying in Europe, and so applied for secondment to East Africa and joined the King's African Rifles. Now that's the male side. My mum, this is before they got married, agreed to fly out to Kenya to marry him, and was the last woman allowed to leave Britain on a plane to East Africa after the declaration of war. Got on a thing called a Sunderland flying boat. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a Sunderland flying boat, but it makes today's float planes look like a mosquito. It was a total monster, and it took 5 days to get to Kenya. Marseille, Alexandria, down the Nile to Juba, down the Nile to Khartoum, into Entebbe, where she was bumped by a general with a lot of stuff. Spent a day, Dad had gone to meet her at Naivasha. No Marjorie. Turned up the next day, they married the following month, and Biology 101, I turned out about 16 months later. It's not just my side of the family that has the adventure, because Jo's family has a similar kind of a history. Her dad was the first electrical engineer to go from Holland for Philips to India, where he set up radio factories before the war, quite a long time before the war. Her mum married Opa, for those of you who speak Dutch or German, in a glove wedding, which meant that she was in Holland, he was in India, his brother stood in, and there was a glove on the table representing. And we don't really know if that was to prevent hanky-panky on board ship, but she was a married lady when she went to India. Jo, of course, arrived in the same biology 101 fashion as I did, after her brother, stayed in India and went to medical school. After med school, she went to Holland to do an internship. I thought that was pretty tame stuff. Took off to Zambia, where she did a year's rotating internship, then made a terrible mistake. Because I, by this time, had left Glasgow Veterinary School. I stayed in Kenya until I was about 8. Did my schooling in UK, Glasgow Vet School. 3 days after I graduated from veterinary school, I was back in Kenya. Now, Jo left Zambia to go back to Holland, but stopped in Kenya to go to the National Park. And, well, whether it's downhill or uphill for me, what she thinks, I don't know.